and as you mentioned, I'm sitting here with Keith McLachlan from Standard Bank, and we're talking about some corporate activity which has been taking place over the last couple of weeks that might indicate that the worst is over. Keith, thanks so much for joining us this morning. I wanted to start off with an interesting case, which is, of course, that Will True reverse listing of PBT. Obviously, IT stocks, an indicator that things are turning around. In particular, what does this case mean for that scenario?
Well, it's not a bad indication, definitely not. I mean, in the past year, 12 months or so, we've had Wilderness coming, RGT, Smart coming, PBT now. So there's definitely a bit of a pipeline of new listings, which is never a bad signal. Especially for the small caps, which tend to be more for the risk-seeking individuals. It's possibly a turning sign.
Keith, in particular, this case, I wonder why PBT didn't go for a direct listing itself, because essentially the JSE is treating this as a new listing, isn't it?
Yes. Well, reverse listings are often pushed because they're cheaper and quicker. But they do sometimes come with legacy problems. The old shareholders in the cash shells, the various liabilities that might still exist. So I think in PBT's case, they're probably better to answer. But it's probably once again just a cost and speed issue.
Another interesting factor around this reverse listing is that Will True shareholders are getting 10 new bonus points for every 100 ordinary shares held, essentially compensating shareholders for giving up their voting rights. Is this bringing for whether or not high voting power equates to sort of economic value, or is it nothing really in that regard?
Well, it's collapsing the end structure shares that they used to have because the JSE is phasing that out. There definitely could be an argument that higher voting rights does translate into value, and this might be a nice case study. Unfortunately, one occurrence of this is not necessarily a statistical trend. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
And in terms of whether or not those shareholders were adequately compensated in your view?
We'll see how they vote.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay, cool. Looking at some of those rights issues you mentioned earlier, we've got Chemspec looking to raise 100 million, essentially to douse the debts that they've incurred and increase production after a fire that they had last year. Just talk us through that.
Chemspec's case, they have an insurance claim that's outstanding. The fire knocked their production, of course, and that impacts working capital. And they've got this deficit. With the insurance claim on the back burner, there's some legal issues there or complications. They've turned to equity markets to raise it. That's really what's happened in Chemspec's case.
Two other companies, Hulamin and Equestria, also issuing a rights offer. Equestria 650 million was successfully raised yesterday. But I want to move on to another company which is sort of top on your books, which is Pan African Resources. Now, this is a UK company operating in a dollar-denominated industry and using rands. They are coming out with their full-year results at the end of August, and there's quite high expectations for that.
Well, what's interesting is that their last year's earnings, EPS, were impacted by impairment charges in gold exploration projects. Of course, if you look at that trading update, those impairments haven't been reoccurred, and you see earnings lifting up to HEPS level. HEPS actually in pounds has grown by about, I think it was 16 to 26%. I think that's a true reflection of how much PanAf has grown. But of course, the rand has strengthened versus the pound, and that's dropped the rand-denominated earnings to only about 10% higher than last year.
They were having a couple of problems around their Barberton security mines. Are those all sorted out pretty much?
It sounds like it is. I was reading today in newspapers, specifically the CEO, talking about this illegal mining, the security costs around it. And it sounds like that's been mostly sorted out, and for at least the latter part of the year, they've been operating smoothly.